Hi, guys. I've got some breaking news this Thursday morning. Yesterday afternoon, the appeals court in Georgia decided to put on hold the entire Rico lawsuit against Donald Trump and the 8 other defendants. Why are they doing this? Because they have scheduled a hearing for early October where they're going to decide whether Fani Willis, the district attorney for Fulton County, should be disqualified based on an alleged conflict of interest. None of this makes any sense to me because the personal relationship she had with one of the prosecutors she hired is not a conflict of interest. They were on the same side of the case. I want you to know that this means there is not a chance that this criminal trial moves forward before the election or even this year. With oral arguments happening in October, it's going to take quite a while for the court probably to make this decision. So we need to write that one off for this year. And if Donald Trump is elected in November, maybe forever. I want to draw your attention, though, to how ridiculous this argument is that this is a conflict of interest that should result in a disqualification. Andrea Junker on Twitter said it perfectly. Take a look at this. Yeah, her point is, since when does having someone buy you dinner disqualify you? What about all these lavish vacations, for example, that folks like Clarence Thomas received from people who had interests before the court? And why in the world, if having a dinner paid for you would disqualify you from a case, why wouldn't having your wife participate in the insurrection as allegedly Clarence Thomas's wife, Ginny Thomas, did? I have no idea. Good question. But since we're on the topic of Donald Trump, let's briefly touch on the other criminal cases in process now. Another update from yesterday afternoon was that the Manhattan DA's office is pushing back against the request of Donald Trump's lawyers to lift the gag order that has been in place since this spring on him. Now, the gag order, which was amended in April, as you may know, forbids Donald Trump from making or directing others to make public statements. So nothing in court. That's why he could have testified if he wanted to. So it forbids Donald Trump from making or directing others to make these public statements that would attack the witnesses, the jury, members of the prosecutor's office other than Alvin Bragg, the court staff other than the judge, as well as none of these comments can be made about these people's families. Let's talk about Florida, where Judge Aileen Cannon, someone that Mary Trump calls his personal pocket judge, has done something quite bizarre. She is holding a hearing later this month on June 21st, and she is allowing non-parties, so the kinds of people who file amicus brief, friend of the court briefs, who don't usually in a federal court participate in oral argument. She has invited these non-parties to speak before her in support, get this, in support of dismissing the indictment, the federal indictment in Florida on the documents case, on the keeping and hoarding of these highly classified documents. Okay, that case, she is inviting into her court non-parties to make the argument to disqualify Jack Smith, arguing that he was appointed unconstitutionally. That should be interesting. Apparently also folks on the other side writing amicus briefs will be there too, but this is so insane. It almost belongs in Crazy Town, but I got something better for you. Okay, what about the fourth case? The case in DC with Judge Chutkan. Well, we are still waiting for SCOTUS, for the Supreme Court, to make a decision in the immunity case that has been before them. And they are just dragging their feet, just like the tortoises that are carved into different parts of this neoclassical edifice that they call their home. Or maybe they think of it more as their temple, because they certainly act like religious figures when they're imposing their own views on the rest of us, overturning precedent. You know, I'm back to referring to Roe versus Wade. So we're waiting. Later this morning, being a Thursday in June, we will hear some opinions being announced. Now, the court has, I counted, close to 30, if I've got it right, cases they still have not announced. So I'm not sure they're going to be able to get all of their work done in June unless they schedule more dates to announce opinions in both June and into early July. So I would be remiss, given that it is D-Day, if I fail to thank those who sacrifice their lives, sacrifice sometimes their limbs, and sacrifice their mental health for defending our country and for going to fight fascism in Europe. And I also want to draw attention to some of the other reasons that we fought this war. It wasn't just this abstract idea of fascism beginning with Hitler invading Poland. It was because of the Holocaust, of the systematic murder of 6 million Jews. Of them, 1.5 million of the victims were children. This is something that, as a Jewish person, as an American part of the Jewish diaspora, is something we have never forgotten, and I'm incredibly grateful for those who served. I have to lay out a contrast here. Donald Trump, who has shamelessly and repeatedly said that he always wanted a Purple Heart. This is for being wounded or killed during battle. He was never part of the military. In fact, he dodged the draft, pretending to have some sort of bone spurs in his feet. And he did not actually serve. In fact, he has been so disrespectful to those politicians and elected officials who have served that it still sticks in my mind. I'll never forget what he said about John McCain. He said of him, "I like people who weren't captured." It's unbelievable. But I also want to bring back into your mind the fact that Nikki Haley, when she was still against Trump, and before she decided to announce that she was going to vote for him, just days before he was convicted by a jury on 34 felony counts, let's play this and remember what Nikki Haley had to say about Donald Trump dodging the draft.
You know, to sit there and mock my husband for not being with me on the presidential trail because he is deployed and serving our country. You mock one veteran, you're mocking all veterans. But this is a pattern, Dana. He's done this over and over again. Whether he went and called military members suckers, whether he was at Arlington Cemetery saying what was in it for them, why would they do this? The problem with Trump is he's never been anywhere near a uniform. He apparently had some sort of foot reason that he says he couldn't do that. These men and women sacrifice for us every day. They're willing to shed blood. That's the values that made this country great. And anybody that excuses what he continues to say against the military is hugely mistaken, because this is going to be the president of the United States. We have to start doing more to help our veterans. They don't get the due they deserve. They don't get taken care of. We've got to start watching out for them. You can't do that if you've got a commander-in-chief that disrespects them. Those are fighting words for the military. In South Carolina, we love our military. We fight hard for them. We want to make their lives better. We don't mock them. And what he did is just disgusting. And anybody that agrees with it or says it's okay is disgusting along with them.
Even though she's supporting him now, that is still true. Okay, now I want to mention one more thing before we move to Crazy Town. I was very disappointed in a case that just came down in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans. And this is something you're not going to hear about probably on any of the news shows that you follow, but it's so important to us individually. If you have any investments, whether it is in a 401k or you are part of a union or public pension fund, if you work, for example, if you were a teacher or a firefighter and such, you may be impacted by this decision. And the decision by the court was to strike down some disclosure rules that were promulgated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. I hope I haven't lost you. Let me just lay this out in more clear terms. There is an entire industry. These are private pools of capital similar to mutual funds, but they are very deregulated. They were, when in the 1940s, when mutual funds got regulated because there were a lot of abuses, there was a small exception for these private pools of capital, meant not to be sold to the public, meant to be only purchased by sophisticated investors. Well, that tiny little world of hedge funds and private equity represents $26 trillion. And the reason the SEC wanted to have more disclosures around fees that the managers of these funds charge, because they can be astronomical. Fees and other types of things that would be real conflicts of interest, the kind of disclosure you get if you own a mutual fund, either directly or in your retirement account. The reasoning the judges gave here is very faulty. They said that the SEC overstepped its authority granted to them by Congress and said these rules weren't necessary because these funds, these private funds, whether private equity or hedge funds, are only purchased by sophisticated investors. Well, this is so wrong-headed. I wrote this paper right after the 2008 financial crisis called The Sophisticated Investor and the Global Financial Crisis, which was published in a peer-reviewed book. And, to make that simple, I would say that it was the so-called sophisticated investors that got us into the mess that we got into in the run-up to the 2008 financial crisis. It was sophisticated investors that were the major feeder funds into the Madoff fraud pools of capital, the Madoff hedge funds. Now, all hedge funds aren't corrupt. All hedge fund managers aren't bad or terrible people. But the problem is there is no sunlight in this area. And I'm very disappointed in this. And the reason why it could affect you if you are part of a pension fund or even a regular 401k plan is that the funds themselves, these pension funds, sometimes give their money to be managed by these private equity managers or into hedge funds. And so we are indirectly impacted by this $26 trillion, very opaque market. Okay, let us talk now about Crazy Town. Crazy Town today is Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where a representative, Congressman Byron Donalds of Florida, was campaigning yesterday for Donald Trump at this Black voter outreach event. And during this event, he actually said and went on about it that Black families were stronger and doing better during the Jim Crow era. I kid you not. This is a Donald Trump surrogate trying to attract Black voters. I could not respond to this better than Hakeem Jeffries did back in the U.S. Capitol. Of course, Jeffries is the ranking member. This means he is the leader of the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives. Let's take a listen to this.
Mr. Speaker, it has come to my attention that a so-called leader has made the factually inaccurate statement that Black folks were better off during Jim Crow. That's an outlandish, outrageous, and out-of-pocket observation. We were not better off when a young boy named Emmett Till could be brutally murdered without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when Black women could be sexually assaulted without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be systematically lynched without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when children could be denied a high-quality education without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be denied the right to vote without consequence because of Jim Crow. How dare you make such an ignorant observation? You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. I yield back.
He said it. That's all I've got for you today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And remember, please subscribe to Mary Trump Media. We have tons of programming that we are adding to the network. And of course, this is the place you go for live Nerd Avenger shows every Tuesday and Thursday at noon. You can watch Morning Jen every Monday through Friday. And on Wednesday, at our new time slot, is a Muslim and a Jew walk into a podcast featuring Wajahat Ali, the Muslim, and me, Jennifer Taub, the Jew. Thanks so much.